Welcome back, everybody. It's time for another ranking video. Today we're going to take a look at all 10 games from Games by Apollo, or as I've always just called them, Apollo. I was really excited to do this one. I only had one Apollo game when I was a kid, and that was Lost Luggage, and I absolutely adored Lost Luggage when I was a kid. And it's funny because when you're a kid, it's amazing how differently your brain works and how you can just be amused by the simplest things. But I remember I just loved the artwork on the Lost Luggage cartridge so much. I thought it was hilarious. So I would just dig out the Lost Luggage cartridge just so I could look at it. And I don't know, it amused me. Like, I literally just got the cartridge out just so I could look at it. Kids. But yeah, I was excited. I loved Lost Luggage. It's been a while since I've played it. I was trying to decide what publisher to do next. I wanted to do a larger, obviously not a super large one, but one that had a few more games than I've done in these ranking videos yet. So I chose Apollo because of Lost Luggage, and let me just say, buckle up. You're in for a ride. This is not the greatest collection of games. Oh my gosh. So I will say up front that looking into Apollo and the history of Apollo, they were one of the first third-party publishers after Activision to publish games for the Atari. They were one of the first. And then they were also one of the first companies to go bankrupt during the video game crash. So they had a pretty quick run. There's not a lot of time involved there. They burned out very quickly. Did they burn bright? Not really. There is some interesting stuff here. I don't want to prattle on too long. Let's go ahead and get into it with our first game, Final Approach. So when I first launched this game, this is what I was presented with. I had no flippin' idea what was going on. I was dumbstruck with confusion. Like, what am I looking at? What's going on here? So after not really being able to figure out what was going on, I looked up the manual and okay, I'm just gonna be upfront. I absolutely hate this game. You play as an air traffic controller guiding airplanes to a safe landing. Most of the gameplay revolves around you moving around this little black cursor here. And this game is just tedious, it's unengaging, and it's just not in the least bit fun, at least not to me. I'm really curious. Let me know. Is there somebody out here who loves this game? Do you actually play this for enjoyment? Because I have a hard time believing this. There are some gameplay variations that increase the difficulty, but nothing that makes the game any better. Like, it is just so cumbersome. You take your little cursor and you click on the airplane, and then you can change the direction of the airplane, like to move in a different direction, and you're just trying to get it lined up onto the runway, and to not crash and to not leave the screen. Like, I would avoid this one at all costs. I really don't like this one. So, as if you couldn't tell, I'm going to give Final Approach an F. Up next, we have Guardian. Okay, so I had a really rough time ranking this one. It is better than Final Approach, I'm happy to say, but that was really not hard to do. And that said, it's still pretty bad. This is a space shooter that has you protecting planets from bombs being dropped by a UFO. It's controlled using the paddle controller, which is usually a good sign for me. I like my paddle games. I will say the UFO and planet graphics are nice, and this is a neat idea that I like in concept, but this is just killed by its controls. You can't shoot while moving, which really sucks and just kills my flow. And I just do not understand this decision. It just makes the game so clunky and But to make it even worse, if you move the paddle while shooting, while you're stuck shooting and not moving, when you release the button, you will transport to where you turn the paddle after releasing fire. So, as if it isn't bad enough that I can't shoot while moving, then if I accidentally like just move the paddle just like a tiny little bit while I'm pushing down the shoot button, when I release that shoot button, I'm suddenly, like 2 inches to one side. It just really throws me off. This is another one I just do not like. Good concept, very, very poor execution. With all of that said and done, I'm also going to give Guardian an F. Up next, we have Infiltrate. Finally, a game that I will probably want to play again someday. But don't get it twisted, it is still not a great game. It's a one-screen game that has you playing as a secret agent tasked with stealing documents and getting out alive. The graphics are nothing remarkable and pretty bland. The elevators throw me off because you get on them automatically when you're near them, and it's just... I just couldn't get a handle on that. It just threw me off. I would walk up to the elevator and then end up shooting past the elevator because I keep the joystick pressed down, and I don't need to. You just stand beside it and then you'll get on it. It's just very confusing, and I do not like how this was implemented. The way that enemies respawn causes a lot of frustration too. They constantly respawn in the exact same location, or a lot of times they'll just spawn right on top of you, killing you immediately. So, I will say, after Final Approach and Guardian, this was a nice change of pace, but still severely lacking in terms of gameplay. Like I said, I will play this again one day. There was something that I did like about this, and it is leagues better than the other games that we've covered so far. So with all that said, I'm going to give Infiltrate a C. Lockjaw is up next here, and it is also known as Shark Attack. I guess the name had to be changed because they were sued by the people who own the rights to the Jaws movie because of the similarity to the name. Get used to hearing me say this, but this is a game of which I enjoy the concept. It's a good idea. It is just very poorly executed. This is a maze game where you play as a diver retrieving diamonds from the water and avoiding a shark and the Loch Ness Monster. I think the diver and shark graphics look pretty good, and the scenery at the top of the screen look just fine. The biggest issue here is your freaking character gets stuck on everything. Just look at the footage here. I just keep getting stuck. Your hitbox is much bigger than your sprite here, and it's just really annoying. You just keep getting stuck everywhere. The shark shows up at random, and it's impossible to predict where he's going to show up next, and you have no ability to fight back. There's no power pellet here. You're just helpless. It's not very fun to play. I wanted to like this one. It's just not good. All that said, it's still better than Guardian and Final Approach, as frustrating as it is. And I don't know, I do like the concept and graphics, so I'm going to go ahead and give Lockjaw, or Shark Attack, a D. And here we go, finally, Lost Luggage. The reason I was excited to do the Apollo ranking. Damn you, Lost Luggage! Like I said in the beginning, I thought the cartridge art on this was hilarious when I was a kid, and I would just pull it out and admire it. I don't know, kids are freaking weird. I wish I was that easily amused now. The concept of the game revolves around an airport carousel going bonkers and throwing suitcases everywhere, with your goal being to catch them. It plays very much like Kaboom, but with the joystick instead of the paddle controllers, and the ability to move up and down. It's also, it's just not as good of a game as Kaboom, but I still think it's pretty solid. I think the graphics are just fine. I especially enjoy when we're able to see the contents of the suitcases when they burst open from hitting the ground. I thought the bras and panties were hilarious as a young lad. I still like this game. It is definitely, in my opinion, among the top tier of Apollo games. It is not without its flaws, but maybe nostalgia is clouding my judgment a little here. But whatever. It's my ranking. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give Lost Luggage a B. It's finally time to throw some sports ball into the mix. We have Racket Ball. I think it's really cool that there's an intro where the competitors come out and shake hands, complete with music. When this happened, I was very impressed. You have the lights on the ceilings, you have the walls, it's kind of like a faux 3D space. And then you have a little animation, and they come in and they shake hands, and there's music. Like, I was very impressed when this game started. And then I started playing the game. And I was very confused as to what the heck was going on when it started. I thought there were several balls in play, but it turns out that the other balls are actually the shadows of the one ball. It's very confusing. It's kind of an ambitious idea, but just didn't really work out, in my opinion. It took me a while to understand what was going on, but the rules of racquetball, luckily, are pretty simple to grasp. But I just never really felt like I was in control of the action. Not as much as I would like, at least. It was very chaotic, and with the extra shadows, and I don't know. I just had a hard time getting a grasp on the game. Now, granted, I am pretty bad at sports ball games in general, so take this with a big grain of salt. But, yeah, Racquetball, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a D. This next game is the very first Apollo game that was ever developed, and that is Skeet Shoot. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'd love to do a deep dive into the history of Apollo one day. I find them incredibly interesting, and I bet you there's a bunch of cool, neat, interesting early video game stories to uncover and talk about. Especially with this Ed Salvo, he seems like an interesting guy. Skeet Shoot here was developed independently by Ed Salvo, who was a self-taught 2600 programmer. And I'm going to try to keep that in mind and try not to be too harsh when I talk about this game because, you know, he was still learning and he taught himself and, you know, nothing against Ed Salvo, but this is another one that I don't know if I ever want to play this one again. It's just not a good game. The graphics are pretty rough and primitive, and the gameplay, it just sucks. I mean, I just gotta be honest. The gameplay variations let you decide where the shooter is and the direction that the clay pigeons come from, which allows you to get practice so you can get better, you know, being in the different spots and shooting in different directions. But it's just never really fun. But you know what? It's better than Final Approach and Guardian. Plus, it has the cool backstory with Ed Salvo, who, again, was very new to programming for the system at the time. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give Skeet Shoot a D. Alright, now it's time to get into some of those classic Atari space games. Up next, we have Space Cavern. Now, this is definitely one of the better Apollo games, but that's not saying much. I probably don't have to keep reminding you that, but yeah. It definitely has a Demon Attack vibe to it. It definitely reminded me a lot of Demon Attack, just not nearly as good. It's a fixed shooter with some neat ideas that I like. You also have enemies that come from the side, so while you're taking out the enemies coming down above you, you also randomly have bad guys coming to your side. And I think that's a really cool, neat idea. I love the concept. Again, I love this concept. It's just not very well executed. Especially, like, so with this one, with the enemies coming on the side, no matter what gameplay mode I played, if it was one that had those guys coming in from the side, they would spawn for, like, the first couple minutes, but every time the longer I played, like, eventually they just stopped showing up. And it was really disappointing because, like, one of my biggest gripes about this game is just dull. It just gets boring. And having those guys coming from the side really adds a nice twist to the gameplay. But then, like, they just stop spawning, and it gets so boring. I like the enemy designs. I think they look pretty cool. But yeah, it just gets boring. No matter what setting I tried, it was just boring. Changing the difficulty in the game mode certainly helps the game become more enjoyable, but it still gets boring. I really wanted to like this one more. And I'm probably only giving it this grade because I think it does have some pretty neat ideas, and I do like some of the graphics on the enemies here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give Space Cavern a C. In our second space game, we have Space Chase. This is a shooter, and like Space Cavern, it just gets kind of boring quicker than I think it should. So let me say, the graphics are really neat. I think this scrolling effect is really, really cool. I think it looks really nice, and it's really cool because there's also, in the game variations, you have a daytime setting and a nighttime setting, and it changes the color of the scrolling graphics. And I do think that looks very nice, especially for the Atari. I'm very impressed by this. But the character and enemy designs, I think, are just kind of bland. It's very repetitive. Again, you know, playing with the game variations of difficulty helps out a lot, and it definitely makes it more engaging and a little bit more fun. But I think there are some people that really, really like this game. And if that's you, that's awesome. I wish I liked it more. I don't know. I had a tough time with this, and I was hovering between a couple scores, but I don't know. I got bored way too fast, way too quickly for this kind of game, because I normally love this kind of stuff. With all of that said, I'm going to give Space Chase a C. Don't be mad if this is your favorite game. And our last game is Wabbit. Which, you know, that's a fun one to say. Wabbit. I don't get to do my Elmer Fudd very much. So we get to end on a good note. I really like this one. I don't know how people in the larger, you know, retro gaming community view this one. I have heard some people talk about this not very positively. And you know, it's not a horribly fantastic game by any stretch of the imagination, but after playing all of these other games from Apollo, I was pretty impressed with this one. These are some of the best graphics of the Apollo game library. In my opinion, I think they look very nice. It's very cool. You're playing as a female protagonist, and from what I understand and the little bit of research I did before I rank these, besides, you know, playing the games, is that this is supposedly like the first female protagonist in a game. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but that is what I've read in several places. So that's really cool. That's awesome. So the game revolves around you playing as a farmer who is throwing what the manual refers to as wanton eggs at the rabbits to stop them from stealing your precious carrots. There's less variety of modes than the others in the list, like not as many different gameplay variations, which would have made this one a bit better if there was maybe a little more to play with as far as variations in the gameplay. But again, I don't know why. I like this one. It is really repetitive, just like a lot of the other games that I had complaints about earlier. It is pretty repetitive, and it pretty quickly devolves into just chaotic button mashing. Like, once you have the rabbits running so fast, it's hard to even try to aim. You're just kind of mindlessly hitting the button, which isn't the most fun thing in the world, but I don't know. I still enjoyed my time with it. The graphics and the speed really helped this one for me. There's a lot of personality that just kept me playing. I'm definitely going to play a lot more Wabbit. I am. I really like this one, and I'm glad that it was the last game on the list, because Final Approach was just such a bad first impression. So with all that said and done, I'm going to give Wabbit a B. And there you have it, all 10 games published by Games by Apollo. I think that's all 10 games. It looks like they have some prototypes that have been released that were never officially released while they were still actually producing games. And those will probably end up going into a future installment of unreleased Atari games. Definitely very curious about those. Pompeii looks really interesting. And there was another one that looked like it was like a Racket Ball wizard. I can't remember what the name of it off the top of my head. But, I mean, I'm glad that I experienced all of those games. I found myself being way more interested in the history of Apollo games while I was playing these games and reading about them than I was the actual games. Just overall, the games aren't very good, and honestly, for the most part, a good portion of them are pretty bad. But that's just my opinion. That's my ranking. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know where I'm wrong. Let me know what your ranking is. I always love to hear from you guys. Expect some more ranking videos very soon. I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you have a beautiful day. And I will see you next time. Bye.